Damien.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Mr. Pardy, there was a bit of an exchange during your opening statement that talked about if there's a difference between freedom of expression and freedom of speech. And I know in the Charter it does talk about expression, but the outline of what that means for speech. So I'm wondering if you could unpack a little bit about what freedom of speech is in Canada and the reflections of what that means in the context of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Sure, yes, thank you for the question. So just on the terms, yes, the Charter uses the term freedom of expression, and that is the proper legal term, but free speech is basically a shorthand for that. Now, expression includes more than speech. I mean, the clothes that you wear on your back could be a form of expression. But the two terms are essentially used synonymously when you're talking in this kind of a context. That right in the Charter has been interpreted by the Supreme Court in a, I would say, a utilitarian way, which is unfortunate. So what I mean by that is, and I alluded to this in my statement, the Supreme Court has tended to say that free speech is free when it is useful to society. And that, of course, means that it's not really free speech at all, because the right of free speech, like all charter rights, essentially, are supposed to act as a space for individuals to resist the interests of the group in the form of the government. And so if it is allowed that we infringe on these rights because the group wants to, then they're not really functioning as rights at all. They're functioning as something else, as a means to establish a collective interest. And so I think we have the wrong end of the stick in that sense in this country about what our charter rights mean, and in particular, the right to free speech.
So if I could follow up on that, because we often hear about what the limits of free speech are in the context of the Charter as well. So I'm wondering if you could expand on that a little bit, because that's often used, as I would suggest, a justification to silence free speech, because there is the interpretation of that section of the Charter that does that's often used by government in different ways. So could you expand on what limitations are reasonable versus not?
Yes, sure. So but here's the irony, right? So your mandate seems to be to inquire into protecting freedom of expression. And the asks that I'm hearing are all about governments doing things or subsidizing things or creating more rules and creating more restrictions. Those things are the opposite of free speech. If you want free speech, as I alluded to, have government out of it. That's what it means. If you're asking for government to intervene, you're talking about something else altogether. And so, again, we have this upside down.
So,
yeah, go ahead.
So and I apologize. Time is short, but I do just want to nail down one of the aspects of Bill C-63 is that it changes the definition of hate speech, and that moves it from the current objective measure that is, causing violence or harm to could be things that involve things like offense or the feeling of hurt. So I'm wondering if you could just unpack that a little bit in about a minute, and then I have one follow-up question I want to make sure I get in before the 6 minutes is up.
Sure. Well, in the text of C-63, they have tried to draw a line between hate speech on the one side and offensive speech on the other, saying offensive speech is okay, but hate speech is not okay. And that sounds reasonable, right? But of course, nobody knows where the line is. And so if you are speaking in a way that some people would regard as offensive, there is no guarantee whatsoever that on a particular occasion, a tribunal or a court is going to say, well, no, that is hate speech and you're liable. Okay. So as soon as you go down the road of deciding that you're not allowed to say things that don't violate anybody else's rights, like you're not threatening violence, but nevertheless, the government's going to say you're not allowed to say that. Now you're into dangerous territory in which freedom of speech is actually not being observed.
Thank you. And in the about the minute that I have left, a common topic of conversation before this committee has been Bill C-11 and Bill C-18, the Online News Act and the Online Streaming Act. In about 45 seconds, I'm wondering if you could share your opinion of those two bills with the committee.
Yeah, these are terrible pieces of legislation. They are interfering with both the speech but also the listening of Canadians. And so you can think in some context of freedom of expression as an exchange between speaker and audience. And both have the right to conduct the exchange, the speaker to speak, the audience to listen. And what these two bills do is they give powers to administrators and bureaucrats and offices to interfere in that exchange and to dictate to Canadians what it is they can access and listen to online. They are terrible pieces of legislation.
15 seconds.